Yo, yo, yo. Okay. Mm. This is the first time. I need a round of applause. Let me get myself a round of applause. This is the first time I've had I've almost there. Press one, chap. What's up, everyone? What's up? Dark Skywalker says, "What's up, everyone? What's up, bro?" Um, I don't know if I've seen your name before. Mm, interesting. Welcome, anyway. Sorry if you're regular and I just not recognizing you. But let me go back to what I was saying. This is the first time. What's the time now? 2100 hours, 9 p.m. here in the United Kingdom, in King Charles country, not my king. Um, and first time I've ever actually been on screen exactly at the right time, on the dot sharp. Is that a good omen? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know. Let me know, chat. Is that forebode good tidings? I don't know. I feel like sometimes it's good to be fashionably late. Got 11 people in the chat. It must be because I have got a very, very special guest and I don't want to let him down. Very professional individual. Very professional individual. So I think he made me up my game. 12 people in the chat. Oh my goodness. I was going to say 9. My days. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see. What am I doing here? I want my background to show up. Just wait for a few more people to join us. And then we'll start. I have with me, let me just say, I've got someone special with me. Someone that it was a hit and hope. Complete Hail Mary pass, as you guys will say over there in the States. I was, how did I come across this individual? I was researching for a video. By the way, let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. I just need that validation. Press 1 if you're listening and you can hear me loud and clear. That'd be nice to know. I think you can hear me. Yeah, but yeah, I was researching for one of my videos on Kush. I think I was starting a series. My first ever. Thank you, Darth Skywalker. Says 1. Thank you. I was researching for what was it? It was on Tahaka. Tahaka. Let me get that right. And the 25th dynasty. And I was doing a series on them. And I was looking for something good, you know. This is about a year and a bit ago. I think a year ago, yeah. Maybe 2. And I got some books, I went down the sort of mainstream establishment route first of all, like, but the kind of uh musty names, white names that you know yes, let's look at these black pharaohs, so to speak. Go on. I guess we must look at these black pharaohs, and you get these textbooks. So I looked up Morcuts and his the Black Pharaohs, I think was the title. And what it is, guys. I already knew, like, these are not the Black Pharaohs. These are, I mean, it's like saying, let's look at America's white presidents. The white presidents. It's like, what do you mean? And you got one guy, um, Obama, who put a bit of color in the whole thing, and that's the rest of them are white. So it'd be like saying the white presidents is a bit stupid. But you just do what you have to do. Look up their research, read what they have to say about the whole topic. But I needed something more. I needed somebody to attack this. I needed, because I knew I was going to do a segment in my in the video about how the 25th dynasty, just a little, I had to bite back. I had to bite back at this theme that they're not the Black Pharaohs. They were all black. But I needed somebody, I was looking for someone to have articulated that properly. And then maybe it would inspire me as to how to tactfully put that in without bashing anybody. I ended up bashing people. I ended up just, me, I just bashed people anyway. But I found I found what's his I don't want to say his name. I don't want to say I want to say his name when I'm up just before I present him. I found oh go on, I'll say it. Dr. Keith Crawford is his name. Okay. Dr. Keith Crawford. And I came across this article. It's called Critique of the Black Pharaohs, in quotes, Black Pharaohs. Critique of the Black Pharaohs theme, racist perspectives of Egyptian and Kushite / Nubian interactions in popular media. And I thought, whoa, okay, okay. Keith W. Crawford, it's got a W in it. Sounds very important. He's got to be a sort of an ally. He can't. Keith W. Crawford. Keith W. Crawford. Looked him up and I found it was a brother. The fellow was a brother. I was so proud, especially after reading the article, because the article was so well done, so well articulated as to basically the essence of the article. Excuse me. I can't remember. It was in the African Archaeological Review. So look up that article. It's not very old. It's a 2021 release. And I just couldn't believe after reading the article, it was the best articulation I ever seen of somebody saying, no, this is not just an inaccurate characterization of the 25th dynasty. They were not the Black Pharaohs. Egypt and Nubia and Kush were one great long Nilotic complex of black ethnicities and different black peoples. They were all black. Okay. And this article, I'm telling you now, it reads like it's an amazing, it's not written in a way as well that kind of makes the layman. It's a technical article. It's written by an academic. And I'll go into what kind of academic specifically soon. But it doesn't bore you. So if you got any about half a minute, half an hour at a time, at any one time in the next week, you finish it in about you probably just keep on reading till you finish it because it's that well written. You finish it in about maybe an hour in one sitting if you're like me and you just that's pretty slow actually because I like to digest things. But if you really love this kind of stuff, our history, you probably finish it less time than that. But I took my time over, I poured over it, so I finished in about 90 minutes, just taking notes, writing things, underlining things, and yeah, it's a great article. It's an absolutely great article. And so I read that article and I made a note to self and I said, I've got to get in touch with Keith W. Crawford. Now, who is Keith W. Crawford? He's not actually anything like you might expect. He's not an Egyptologist. He's not a nubiologist. We've had the great nubiologist Professor Manuel Ampimon in the past. He's not that. He's actually, do you know what? I'll stop here. Let me stop here, guys. Let me present the doctor and let me just what time is it? We're 10 minutes into this. We got a few people in. I think what's the time in America? So what's that? So it's like 5 Eastern. You guys have pushed your clock forward a bit. So I know people tend to join as we go along. So I'm gonna just ask the doctor to come on and I'm gonna let the doctor introduce himself properly. What his expertise are and yeah. Let me just ask him to come in. Let me present screen and then the doctor can do he can do himself justice. Let me just hit a few buttons here. Right. Here we go. Doctor, you're on.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. I think press 1 chat if you can hear the good doctor.
Great. I'll wait and make sure everyone can hear.
Yeah.
And can you see the first slide?
We can't see the slide yet. We can't see the slide yet. People say someone saying 1. Thank you, Darth Skywalker. Darth Skywalker says 1. If Elma Smith says 1. Yep. So we can hear you loud and clear, doctor.
But you can't see the slides.
We can't see the slide. I think when we don't really have to worry about that yet. But if you want us to put the slide on now so that we got out of the way, we can do that. So try again to hit present and share
Let me
screen.
do that again. And
Howard Jane, most people can hear the doctor, so I don't know. Maybe you need to fix something down your end.
Try that. And let me try this. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. Where is this? Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me try this. And I apologize because I had it ready to go.
That's all right. That's all right. Whilst you do that, I'll mute you whilst you do that. I also need to say, guys, when so I reached out to Doctor. Let me just finish that story. I reached out to him about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, let's say, and there wasn't there was no Hollywood about him. He got back to me straight away and just asked him to come on, and he said yes. He said he would. And we had a chat about, the kind of things we're going to discuss. And yeah, I just wanted to say that, so just a little lesson in life. You never know until you ask. You never know until you ask. When I started this, I never thought I'd have professionals like the doctor on. But yeah, I'm very humbled to have him on. Right, doctor, please tell us your expertise, and please also, can you explain to us, doctor, how you got into this? Well, when you tell people your professional background, they'll want to know how someone like you got into studying Egyptology and archaeology and history in and of itself. So yeah, just tell us how that happened. Thank you very much. Over to you, doctor.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say thank you to you, Trill, so much for inviting me. I am so humbled this opportunity to present on your program, on your platform here. I also want to say thank you to you for the work that you've been doing and disseminating this information, this critically important information about our history, about the civilizations that we created, all these incredible things that you were doing. So how I'm gonna try again to get the slides, because once I pull the slides up, and it's so crazy because we had them up and everything was
it was up. If you do that, whatever
Mm-hmm.
you did before, do it again, and I'll just have it up.
Try that.
Yeah, there we go. I'm adding that.
You see them?
Yep, I see them, and they've come on, so that's good.
I don't see them. I see. Oh, this is the wrong. Okay,
it's the wrong one.
It's the wrong one. Okay, let me stop sharing. I'm not sure how to.
I'll remove that. Try that one again.
So let's.
Hi, Mariel. It's good to see you. Says Mariel says Wagwan in the chat. Howard Jane, good. You can hear him now. That's brilliant. Who else is in the building? Pedro Chiazzi. Thank you very much. 6466. Got to put some respect on that. Say the full thing. Ifelma Smith 2533. I recognize you. Thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Johan Kraus, PhD. Listen, if this is really you, Dr. Kraus, shout out to you too. I've been I hope you've been enjoying my content, wherein I have been using your name rather liberally. So yeah, I hope you enjoy my content. I don't really think it's Dr. Johan Kraus. Howard Jane says greetings from Sierra Leone. Okay, thank you for joining us from Sierra Leone.
Okay, this is not work. Okay. I think we're almost there.
Good.
Can you see them now?
I can see that. Let me add that to stage. Yep, that's the one. Yep, we can see that.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm so sorry about that. So again, thank you so much for this incredible opportunity. And as Trill mentioned, I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not a historian. I'm a biomedical researcher. I'm a scientist. I do clinical pharmacology research, which focuses on drug development, new therapeutic agents, clinical trials, clinical research. I primarily focus on infectious diseases. So for the past few decades, I've done research with HIV disease and a lot of work also with tuberculosis, viral hepatitis, and we're developing new products for treating HIV. Also, much interest and research on a cure for HIV, but also better therapies for tuberculosis, better therapies for viral hepatitis. And so that's what I do. That's my day job. So the question that you ask is, how did I get interested in this area of African culture and African civilization? I want to thank two great scholars who were mentors of mine. So I did my undergraduate work at Cornell University. Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan was a scholar who was on faculty in our Africana Studies department at Cornell University, which was one of the premier Africana Studies departments. Now, I was a biology major, but when I was a senior, I took his course, which focused on African origins of Western religions and philosophy. And so Dr. Ben, as we affectionately call him, introduced us to the elements of the Nile Valley civilization, the impacts that they had on Western civilizations. Another scholar who I had numerous opportunities to attend lectures, he visited at Cornell, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who was a professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey here in the United States, a phenomenal speaker who influenced me in ways I cannot even begin to tell you, because he would come in, he would speak, he was passionate, he was mesmerizing, and he had done research on the African impact, the African presence in the Americas before Columbus. So this was a book that he wrote, probably this would have been in the mid 70s that he wrote this book, which was backed by phenomenal research and scholarship. And then he went on to publish this Journal of African Civilizations. So he continued with bringing the important research about our contributions. And this led me to a contribution I was able to make to one of his publications, this volume, Egypt, Child of Africa, which is part of the Journal of African Civilizations.
Wow.
I wrote this chapter, The Racial Identity of Ancient Egyptian Populations, based on the analysis of physical remains. And my thinking was, this question of who were the ancient Egyptians and who were the ancient Cushites should be pretty easy to figure out, because we got skeletons, we got mummies, we got all of these physical remains, teeth, hair, bones, skulls, all of this stuff that is preserved. So what does this source of information tell us about the identity of these ancient African, particularly ancient Nile Valley populations in Egypt and Kush? And I was mentored on this project by a real scholar, my mentor, Dr. Shamarka Keita, who is African-American physician, and he's an anthropologist. And so he started publishing research, and I started reading his published papers where he compared the crania, the skull of ancient Egyptian as well as other North African populations, and said, okay, well, what populations do these folks most resemble? Who are they closest to? And many instances showing that these ancient Egyptians from certain periods of time were more closely affiliated with sub-Saharan Africans. But again, understanding there's a lot of variability. There's variability, and we can discuss this variability. If you want me to continue, I can talk about how we got to the point where we are now with the paper I just recently published.
I just want to say, first of all, before you do that, I'm not trying to blow smoke or anything, but I didn't even realize that this is the caliber of the individual that I'm speaking to, because I didn't know that you had written in Mr. Van Sertima's publications. Van Sertima to me is one of the greats as well, because his work is actually just completely blew my mind. And I do a lot of research for my videos, and I've just so far, confession, I've not actually finished his book They Came Before Columbus. I'm reading it in stages. I read the section on the Olmec,
Mm-hmm.
the Olmecs, and I'm just about to begin his section on the Moorish introduction into the Americas. Now, I did that deliberately because I'm an avid reader, and
Mm-hmm.
I realized a long time ago that it's good to read and it's good to consume a lot, but I want to take these books in. I want to imbibe them properly. A good book is like a good meal. You want to savor it. And so I said, I'm going to read the Olmecs bit, and then at some point I'm going to come back to this book, because I don't want to rush through this book. And what you just said yeah, it's just reinvigorated me. I need to get back to They Came Before Columbus and really take in the section on the Songhai Empire potentially sailing into the Americas and whatnot. But another thing I wanted to say is, wow, you also have worked with Dr. Shamalka Keita. This is incredible. So guys, I say this, I already kind of knew the caliber of the person I was speaking to. I'm even more impressed. But for the folks listening, grab a notepad, grab a pen. This is gonna be lit, as we say. This is gonna be lit. So yeah, carry on. So how did you come then to write this paper?
Right.
So we're talking about a paper in 2021. This is the paper by which I came to know Dr. Crawford. Go on, Doctor.
Great. So thank you. So I actually, and I'll just tell you straight up, I'm a nerd. So like you, Trill, I read a lot. And I do exactly what you do, because I have books. My thing is, get the book in the library. There are books in my library that had been there for like 20 or 30 years before I actually read them, but I did eventually read them. And sometimes you read things in phases and bits and pieces. So that's really cool. But I'm a nerd. I watch a lot of documentaries. Most people are watching reality shows and stuff. Nope, I don't watch that. I watch documentaries. I'm a nerd. So I'm watching National Geographic, and I'm watching this documentary, Rise of the Black Pharaohs. And after I watched it, I was fuming. I was fuming because in this documentary, these folks had essentially resurrected the classic racism that we saw from the 19th and 20th century. So it's important to understand that Egyptology, so, Europeans are just getting acquainted with ancient Egypt at the end of the 1700s and going into the 1800s. They're going all over, colonizing this place, colonizing that place. And so they stumble into ancient Egypt, and then they start discovering ancient Egypt. And this is happening during the peak of the slave trade. And it's happening during a period where anti-Black racism is most intense. And one of the ways that they coped with the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade and the treatment of people of African descent was simply just diminishing their humanity. That these people were not human. They lacked the intelligence. They weren't really people. So they didn't create any civilizations. They didn't do anything. So yeah, slavery is cruel, but they're getting the benefits of being exposed to civilization because they didn't have any of their own. So this type of thinking that I write about in the chapter with Dr. Van Sertima, but touch on it again in the more recent piece, is what's driving people. But when they're going into ancient Egypt, they're seeing Black people every corner they turn. Seeing pictures of Black people in the temples, in the tombs. They're seeing pictures of Black people. They're seeing evidence in the skeletal remains and seeing evidence in the mummies. And so they had to cope with this, and this became a problem. And so this racism was transferred into Egyptology. But what is done in this particular documentary is they take the racist mind, the racist European colonial mind, and they extend that to the Egyptians, which the Egyptians did not think the way that modern racist or modern racist philosophy or thinking works. And so they extend that to the Egyptians, and they create a narrative that the Egyptians hated the Cushites, they hated the Nubians, they hated these people to the south because they were Black. And wouldn't you know, there's a twist in history where these Nubians take over Egypt and rule as the pharaohs. Who would have guessed? Okay. And that's the narrative.
And it's just to interrupt. Sorry, Doctor. Sure. I know the documentary you're talking about. I came across it as well. And I actually tried to rewatch it in preparation for this live. And I got about 60 seconds in, and I said, no, I can't handle this.
It's because very hard. The language that they use. Go ahead.
It's doubly frustrating because it's billed as a documentary that's meant to be it's meant to kind of be in allyship and to say, oh, look, in support of the idea that, oh, Black, there are great Black civilizations too, but it's so minus that patronizing premise in itself.
Very patronizing.
The premise is, as you said, oh, well, these people were seen by the Egyptians as lesser than and lower than. Complete false premise to begin with. It's an awful documentary. Sorry, carry on, Doctor.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so and the irony is that in this documentary are some of the archaeologists that are doing incredible work in Nubia, in Kush. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're on here, you're talking this crap about the Egyptians and hating the Kushite and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you are literally rewriting the history. Your work is playing a role in revolutionizing how we think about Kush. You are doing excellent work, and yet you come on board and push this narrative. So this was one of the issues. And so one of the things we're going to talk about, we're going to talk a lot about it, is the relationship between the Kushites and the Egyptians. And I think what we're going to talk about is going to dispel a lot of these myths. And so to make a long story short, because one of the first things we did, I called my mentor, Dr. Keita, Dr. Shamarka Keita. I'm like, Shamarka, what the heck is going on? I can't believe they're doing all of this. And, he pulled together other Black Egyptologists, Black archaeologists, Black nubiologists, Black geneticists, population geneticists, people who are out here who are publishing in these different realms. And we approached the producers and basically, said, why do you all keep putting out this crap? This is garbage. And it's painful because they had so much really good stuff that they could be talking about Kush or Nubia, which they put some of it in there, but not as much as they could have. So basically, I write this article to say that, first of all, this Black pharaohs, referring only to the 25th dynasty, which was an amazing dynasty, is a bunch of crap. So just stop it, okay? Because what you have created, and what I think happened, is that this was a response to Afrocentrism, where Black people started saying, okay, wait a minute, we created these civilizations. We're the source of that. They push back. And so they're saying, okay, well, we'll give you a little something. We'll give you the Black. We'll admit, yeah, some pharaohs were Black, the 25th dynasty. Well, yeah, 25th dynasty. And as you're going to see, a whole lot of other dynasties too. Were all of the Egyptians or pharaohs Black? No. Were all the people who lived in Egypt Black? No. It was a multiracial society. Let's be honest about that. But what we have to understand, we have to make sure we ask the right questions, is what were the origins of this civilization? How do we show connections with Africa? So a lot of these things I dispute and challenge in the article. And by the way, you can find this article, Critique of the Black Pharaohs, if you go to academia.edu, if you go to researchgate.net, go on these sites, do a search, Keith W. Crawford. You can find these articles. You can download them for free. If you go to academia.edu, you can also find the article from Dr. Van Sertima's book. I uploaded it there as well. So you can download these for free if you go to those sites. And if you're interested in some of the scientific stuff that I do, those articles are there too. So
thank you for that.
Any comments before we transition to the next part?
No, just thank you for that. I'll definitely go on that website as well.
Sure.
I'll avail myself of that. Yeah, carry on, Doctor.
So connections between Egypt and Kush/Africa, because what we have done, and as Dr. Keita has said over and over again, who were the ancient Egyptians and stuff? They were Northeast Africans. What did they look like? They looked like people who lived in Northeast Africa. Where did their culture come from? It came from Northeast Africa. That is where Egypt is located, and that is where the culture came from. Does that mean that influences didn't come in from the Middle East or the Near East? It doesn't mean that at all, but it means that the core origin, the connections, the foundation of Egypt and Kush are linked. They're both African. They come from, as I like to say, they came from the same cradle. If I can use the terms by Maria Gatto, and she's a very distinguished archaeologist who's done incredible work in Nubia and Egypt. And she says, ancient Egypt, ancient Kush, they come from the same cradle. They had similar trajectories. And so when we have these discussions about ancient Egypt, we have to remember Egypt, yes, Egypt is in Africa. That's very clear. But Egypt is also at the crossroads. It's at the crossroads of Asia. You cross the Sinai Peninsula, you come right into Egypt, right into Africa. It's at the Mediterranean, so you have connections with other parts of Asia and Europe. So there are different dynamics. There are different things going on. And so during the dynastic period, and just so folks understand what we're talking about, the dynastic period is the period of time when Egypt becomes a unified kingdom. Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt are united into a single kingdom. That happened around 3000 BC or BCE, which is before Christ, before the Christian era. So 5,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. But during that period of time, during the period of time that we had a dynastic Egypt for approximately 3,000 years, Egypt was ruled and conquered by the Hyksos. We'll talk about them later. These are Asiatic people. It was conquered and ruled by Libyans, which are other Africans, conquered and ruled by Cushites, other Africans, conquered and ruled by Syrians, Asiatic people, conquered and ruled by the Persians, Asiatics, the Greeks, Europeans, the Romans, Europeans. So you have people coming in and different people of different racial groups ruling Egypt. And then after that, once we become into this Christian era, where we're at year 2026, they were part. You go back, they were part of the Byzantine Empire. The first Arabs spreading Islam came out of Saudi Arabia and went into Egypt. That is the first place they went into Africa spreading Islam. You have the Mamluk Empire, you have the Ottoman Empire, then the French and the British colonizing. So this is a really kind of turbulent history. And so you have other influences. And if you go to certain parts of Egypt today, you'll say, well, this looks more Middle Eastern. Well, again, they were part of the Ottoman Empire. They're close to the Middle East. But the question, what makes Egypt African? And I want to, first of all, introduce this quote. This is a quote by Dietrich Wildung. Dr. Wildung is an archaeologist who has studied extensively in Kush, in Egypt. He's looked at, in particular, looked at art forms. And he's looked at the evolution of the arts and archaeology and different features, and is very, very convinced that Egypt is kind of like the outlier when you look at the culture from the Sudan. And other people have said similar things, that Egypt in many ways was an outlier. But again, it maybe different forces, different dynamics pushed Egypt further, pushed Egypt to the top. What Dr. Wildung says is, nowadays we know for sure that the cultural evolution started in the Sudan in at least the 10th millennium BC, and the comparable developments in the Egyptian Nile Valley had to wait for 5,000 years. So he's saying that many of these cultural features, cultural advancements are happening in the Nile Valley, but they're happening first in the Sudan and then spreading into Egypt. This means that the roots of pharaonic civilization, therefore the roots of Greek and Roman and finally European societies, lay generally in the north of the Sudan. And this is a message that many people are not going to want to hear. But certainly Dietrich Wildung has done the work. And when he says this, he kind of knows what he's talking about. So I want to make 3 points in terms of how we link the origins of ancient Egypt to Africa, to Kush. The first is this slide. So this is a paper that was actually published just last year. You can see the reference down here in the Journal of Archaeological Science. So basically they're finding an independent domestication of cattle in the Nile Valley. So this is actually in Kush, where they're saying that cattle were independently domesticated
Can I
10,000.
put?
Yes,
Can I?
please.
Sorry, doctor. I just want to say, chat. I know we're all clued up. Well, not all of us. This is why I want to do this. Let me know if you knew that. So, one, I want to see hands. If you knew that, according to as per Dietrich Wilden, Egyptian civilization came from Sudan, the Sudan. If you knew that, press one. If you did not, I don't need anything from you. If you did not, that's fine. You're learning something new. Just put two. I want to know how many people are listening who knew this, because even as clued up as I thought I was, it took a while for this to hit home, because for a while, even myself, I was stuck in, it must have been a shared thing. It must have been a, because they really do this a lot. They hammer home, and been doing this now enough to see the pattern. They love to hammer home, and this is why I believe it's deliberate. At this stage in 2026, I believe it's not ignorance on the quote unquote experts' parts anymore. It's deliberate. They
Mhm,
really exaggerate this Near Eastern thing. Any
mhm,
paper on the
mhm.
genetics always has to go to, no, there's this Near Eastern influence, or there's this Near Eastern. Doesn't matter how tenuous a link it is, it will be the paper. The rest of the paper will be about a Near Eastern influence.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, as per what Dr. Crawford is saying here, and as per what Dr. Wildung, the quote that he presented, is saying, this civilization started autochtonously, I think that's the word, in Africa, in as far as the Sudan. Let me know, chat. People are saying one, thank you. I see one, two, but that's it's incredible that
And
this is going on in 2026. Carry on, doctor. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's something. And let me just mention that this. So this paper, this is very exciting. But if you go back like 40 years ago, some other archaeologists made a claim about an independent domestication of cattle in Africa. So this becomes complicated because there's evidence cattle were domesticated in the Middle East. Well, the question is not necessarily who had it first, because what people will try to say is that Near Easterners brought cattle into the Nile Valley. They brought the domestication as a cultural advancement. What we do know pretty sure is that they did bring certain crops like wheat into the Nile Valley. They did bring other domesticated animals like sheep and goats into the Nile Valley. But what this is saying here is that they did not bring cattle into the Nile Valley, that these Africans already had cattle because maybe cattle domestication was developed in the Middle East. Well, the Africans did it independently. So they separately developed the domestication of cattle. And what you find is a culture, and this is an important concept. There's a culture around the domestication of cattle that you do not see to this extent in the Middle East. And so here is a cave painting from Chad. This is northeastern Chad. And what you can see here are cattle, and we know they're domesticated cattle because they're people around them. And this is actually during a period of time that the Sahara is a rich, fertile plain. So this is something a lot of people forget. They go to Egypt now, or they go to Kush now, they're sailing down the Nile or sailing up the Nile, depending on which, because the Nile flows from south to north. But anyway, they're on the Nile, and you go out a few miles, and then you're in the desert. Well, there wasn't always a desert; it was a fertile plain. And so here's a period.
Shooters, Major Shooters, can you please sort out LARPing, please? Thank you very much. All right, sorry, carry on, doctor.
Right. So for a period of time, it was a fertile plain. Here's a cave painting from Libya, Gilf Kabir. This is actually adjacent to Egypt. These are some more cave paintings. You can see the cattle. You can see these people. These are people attending the cattle. These are rock drawings. This is from Sudan, a part called Wadi Halfa. And you can see the actual, hopefully you can see the actual, this is a rock engraving. Here's a cow. Here's a person attending the cow. Maybe they're milking the cow or herding the cow or whatever. And here's some more depictions of cattle, rock drawings from Sudan. Now, here we are in Egypt. We're in Upper Egypt. You see the same types of images. Here are a group of people and they're around cattle. These are paintings, cave paintings. These are rock drawings from this particular region in Egypt. Here's some more rock drawings. You see groups of men around these cattle. And here's a totally different part of Upper Egypt. And what do you see? Rock paintings, and you see, or rather rock etchings or drawings focus on cattle. So what archaeologists will tell you is that Egypt emerges from this pastoral culture, this culture centered around the domestication of cattle. This is an African dynamic. It's driven by the desiccation of the Sahara, because as the Sahara is driving up, these people now are moving into the Nile Valley because there's water there. And even if you look at this rock painting, here's a boat at the top. And so here cattle, they're hopefully not in the water, but probably on the shore somewhere. So, you know, this is the dynamic, and Egypt is part of this. This is what is bringing us to dynastic Egypt. The next point that I want to make, we talked about this shared pastoral culture. If you look at these grave goods, so they excavated cemeteries, and in this case, this is the pre-dynastic period. So this is before this unification of Egypt that I told you about. And this is the Badarian culture. So these are people pre-dynastic, before the unification of Egypt. But this is in Egypt. And if you look at these grave goods, and you see all sorts of things, hairpins, combs, different types of beads used for jewelry. These types of ceramic jars are used for cosmetics. And so things that people use, personal adornment. How did they decorate their bodies? What type of ornaments and things did they use? And what you find is that these types of grave goods that you see in Egypt are very similar to the types of grave goods that you see in Sudan, in Kush. And so there is this additional layer of connection here, where people are decorating themselves similarly. And this is indicating, you know, a similar culture, maybe similar beliefs in God, or these religious beliefs, because certain amulets and other things that they use that might be religious items. This is a shared culture, and this is shown not only by the grave good, but also household. When they're able to excavate in the remains of homes, they see these similarities as well. And then the last point that I want to make on this particular point about the shared culture, I want you to look here at this map, and here is Egypt. This is Sinai Peninsula here. You're coming into Egypt. This is what we refer to as Lower Egypt, because again, the Nile is flowing from south to north. So this is Lower Egypt, the Delta region, and this is Upper Egypt, which is right adjacent to Kush. So in this Aswan region, these rock drawings, again, they love to draw on rocks and etch things into rocks, but thank God they did, because they last a long time. So this is some artwork that's probably 3,300 years old. This is deep in Egypt. This is in Upper Egypt. This is not in the Mediterranean region. What's the big deal about this drawing? You see, I've circled two men. If you look at this man's head, his head looks the same way as everybody else's head in here. But this guy has a very long head. Why is this man's head so long? His head is long because he's wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt. The white crown of Upper Egypt. This person, as you can see, is attending him. He's carrying like some type of a fan. So it's almost like it's a procession, a royal procession. And then this man seems to have, the one with the long head, wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, seems to be carrying a cane. This is the crook, the shepherd's crook, which is part of the Pharaoh's regalia. So these are the elements of the pharaonic kingship. The pharaonic kingship is the most distinguishing feature of Egyptian civilization. So everybody who thinks of Egypt, well, you know, if you think the first thing that pops in your head is a pyramid, well, what is a pyramid? A pyramid is a tomb for who? For the pharaoh. The pharaoh is the ruler. He is the king of Egypt. He is believed to be God's representation of in their religious system, the God on earth. Okay, so this is that concept being found in Upper Egypt, very close to Nubia. Now, let's look at this slide. So this is what you just saw. The first slide here is just a drawing of this, but this is the actual picture, and I circled again the guy with the white crown of Upper Egypt. Now we have this other artifact. This is an incense burner, and if you look at the drawings on, or the engravings around this incense burner, we center our attention on this. This is circled. So here is a man who's sitting. So he's sitting on, you could say, on a throne. This man also has a long head. What's up with these long heads? Well, this is the white crown of Upper Egypt. This man, you can see something sticking out under his head. This is the false beard of the pharaoh. And this also looks like the shepherd's crook, that the part of the pharaoh's regalia. So here you have another image of the pharaoh, very deep in Africa. But guess what? This is not in Egypt. This is in Kush. This artifact came from a royal burial from Qustul, which is a part of ancient Nubia or Kush, from the A group civilization. And it's believed that this artifact is older than this rock drawing. So maybe around 3,500 BC. So the question becomes, is this Egyptian pharaonic system actually Kushite? Did the Kushites originate this? Did the Egyptians originate? Did both of them? Is this a shared element of their cultures? We aren't sure. But what we are sure is that these images come from very deep in Africa, These are African concepts. This is not something that was brought into Egypt from the Middle East or from Europeans or some other group migrated. No, nobody migrated anywhere. Any migration was going on. It was between the Cushites and the Egyptians, who were migrating between and mixing. In fact, some archaeologists will tell you that during this period of time, this pre-dynastic period of time, the boundaries are blurry. What is Egyptian? What is Cushite? It's hard to sometimes tell based on the archaeology because the two cultures were so much intertwined. Let me just take a break. Before I do that, let me just show you. Here is, so anybody who happens to be in Paris, you can go to the Louvre. You can see this is Osir. He is the mythical first pharaoh. And you can see he's wearing, this is the white crown of Upper Egypt. This is the crook and the flail, which are part of the pharaoh's regalia, along with the false beard. So this is what we saw engraved in the stone and in the incense burner. So I'll stop there to see if there are any questions or comments.
Doctor, thank you very much. I want to say shout out to you, Kieran Grant, 1607. Brother, it's good to see you back here, and he always comes with the goods. Thank you. He says great stuff. Thanks, Dr. Crawford. Hoorah, brother Trill. back at you, bro. Thank you for that $5 super chat. Can I just say,
sure.
I mean, this is incredible. So what you're showing, actually, that cave painting. Now I know about the Custal incense burner, but that cave painting is amazing to me. I don't know if you can go. Yeah, thank you. It's back on screen. Let me just take this off screen. Thank you for that super chat again. But like, we have this in 2026. We're talking, these are the earliest. I looked into the Custal incense burner. That deserves its own treatment in the future. But the Custal incense burner, they're trying to debate it, but I believe, well, they're putting a question mark in it, which is par for the course. It's true to form, is what they do to, whenever this stuff like this shows up. But it is the oldest representation of that, the upper crown of crown of Upper Egypt that we have. It is we find it, first place we find it is in Nubia, or at least in the Sudan, in that area, in the Nubia part of Egypt. And you have these cave paintings showing this going on in Nubia. So I have a group that I speak to on Instagram. Shout out to my Instagram, True Blackgram. If you're on Instagram, even if you don't go on often, please sign in. Find out what your password is. If you've not signed in years, sign in and hit the follow on Trill Blackgram, guys. Please, I need people to follow us on Instagram so we can build up our presence on social media, across all social media platforms. But I have a group on there, and we're constantly talking about what these people, what the establishment, the mainstream, Western dominated academia are sitting on. And this is one of the things that frustrates us constantly. There are academics that know this stuff, that are sitting. There's no way they don't know this stuff. And yet, anytime they ask the question, or anytime they have any input into popularizing or putting ancient Egypt in the popular imagination, they stammer, or sometimes they just outright obfuscates the fact that we are dealing not with a Mediterranean civilization, not with a olive pressing, I don't know what you want to call it. We're dealing with a black civilization. Every time they get a chance on this question, despite knowing this stuff, they say some of the oddest things to deny us of our heritage. And I'm beyond, this is a little rant, as you can guess, guys. I am beyond now giving benefit of the doubt. I'm beyond now. That's what I was going to say about our group on Instagram. We've concluded now in our group, shout out to you guys in the group in Instagram. We've concluded now that none of this is accidental, and that actually we're going to if we're going to get any of this stuff out, we're going to actually have to go on the offensive and not take for granted the fact that there are actually, sorry, but not sorry, a lot of people that in academia, in mainstream academia, that don't like black people, that
Well,
don't like
that's
black people.
yeah, that's
They just
true.
don't.
There's nothing new about that. But
They
I
don't. I
mean,
mean,
you also
it's sorry. It's important to say that because a lot of people think we're dealing with neutral academics just interested in the information. That we're not. We're not. We're not.
yeah,
We're dealing with some very very racist people.
yeah, and to make that point, again, as the some of the archaeologists that were in the National Geographic documentary, again, some of these guys are doing some phenomenal work. Jeff Emberling, from, I think he's at the University of Michigan, has done some and once I connected with him as a result of some of the things he said in the Black Pharaohs, I've seen some of his work, and I was invited to a symposium, a seminar that he did on some of his work, where he's actually preparing to excavate a brand new site from Kush, from Nubia, that nobody knew existed. And God only knows what incredible things he's going to find when he does that. Another one of the people, Pierce Paul Kriesman, who is in that documentary, actually excavated an underwater tomb in Kush. Because one of the things that happened that we thought was going to basically spell doom for Nubian archaeology was in the 1960s, they built the Aswan Dam, which caused a lot of areas in Nubia, in Kush, in the Sudan to flood. Although it actually would be in southern Egypt. But anyway, it's flooding, and it's like, oh my God, all of this incredible history and archaeology is lost. And then Pierce Paul Kriesman, he comes up and does a phenomenal documentary that doesn't have any of the pejorative or derogatory language. He talks about the racism in Egyptology and the racism against the Nubians and the Kushites, but he doesn't incorporate that into his study. He does his excavation. He scuba dives into the tomb and is able to recover artifacts. And so these are the incredible stories that we need to be hearing about. I just put this up here to just help folks orient, because I don't know how familiar people are with the time periods. Pre-dynastic, we're pretty much thinking 4,000, 3,000 BC. Then we have the dynastic period, as I said, the unification, Upper and Lower Egypt around 3,100 BC. The Old Kingdom that we're going to be talking about, dynasties 3 to 6, this period from 2600 BC to 21, so roughly 500, 600 years for these 3 dynasties, actually 4 dynasties. Then we have what is referred to as a first intermediate period. And you'll see where there are 3 of these. And these are periods that historians know there was disarray, there was fragmentation, there was civil discourse. And so Egypt gets very weak during these periods. So you don't have strong rulers, you don't have dynasties. And by the way, a dynasty is a family of rulers. So a ruler comes in, he's succeeded by his son, and then he's succeeded by his grandson, and then maybe he's succeeded by a grandnephew or a brother or someone. Anyway, the fact is they're all family members. So a dynasty is a family member. And the Egyptians, it's patrilineal. Whereas in the Kushites, if we get a chance to talk about the kingdom of Meroe, it was actually matrilineal. So these rulers undergo their succession based on their maternal relationships. So anyway, then we have this very powerful middle kingdom, and I think you all are going to see some very interesting things in this kingdom. Then we go into the second intermediate period, a lot of turmoil, disruption, and Egypt essentially gets conquered by an outside force. The Hyksos, we'll talk about that. Then we have what many will say is the most powerful kingdom is the New Kingdom, 1500 BC to 10,000, 1000 BC roughly. And then another intermediate period where things are in disarray. This is the period that the 25th dynasty, the Kushite pharaohs, actually rule and become the most powerful dynasty during this particular period. And then the Greeks come in, you have the Ptolemaic dynasty, and that lasts until the Romans take control. So I want to talk some about this relationship, the interactions between Kush and Egypt in antiquity.
And that's why we called this, just sorry again, Dr. Tintrop. That's why it wasn't clickbait. That's why we call this Giants of Africa.
That's right.
Some people would have thought we were going to talk about, some people were going to probably thought we were going to talk about Nephilim, but I did that deliberately. It's just a play on that. But we are talking quite literally and figuratively about giants of Africa. That's why we titled this live that, because we're dealing with Kush and Egypt. These are the two titans of ancient Africa. So yeah, sorry, carry on, Doctor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, considering the time period that we're talking about, is not a whole lot of stuff. Well, we're learning more and more and more about ancient cultures, but, you really have to appreciate how far in antiquity it is that we're talking about. But one of the ways to sum this up, these interactions in antiquity, we're talking about a 3,000 year period during this dynastic period. And it's complicated. It's complicated. This reminds me of there's a song, those of you who are in the US, and if you listen to R&B, we have an artist, her name is Leela James, and she has a song, I think she's singing to her boyfriend about their relationship, and she's like, "Don't make it complicated." Well, I wish she had sang that song to the Kushites and the Egyptians, because they did make it complicated. And, when I was talking to Brother Trill early on, and he asked about, well, what about the Kushites and the Egyptians? I said, the way I would sum it up, it's a love-hate relationship. It's a love-hate relationship. But what I will say is, when they did hate each other, and when the Egyptians hated the Kushites, it's not because they were black, as that documentary tried to show. We're going to see why they did when they hated them, why they hated them. But it's a love-hate relationship. So let's talk about some of the love part. And I'm just going to start this discussion during the 6th dynasty of Egypt. And again, this is not to imply that there aren't interactions going on in earlier dynasties. There are, but this is easy to present because we have good documentation. And this is from Harkov, who is the governor of a district in Upper Egypt. So keep in mind, Upper Egypt is in the southern part of the country. And Harkov documents very carefully multiple excursions into Kush. And in particular, he's going to this kingdom called Yam. And most scholars don't know exactly where Yam is, but they do know it's somewhere in Nubia, somewhere in Kush, somewhere south of Egypt. So Harkov undergoes an excursion to Yam. And to get to Yam, he has to negotiate and interact with other Kushite chieftainships or kingships or whatever, but he's got to navigate to get to Yam. So he returns from Yam, and he's a happy camper. So he's returning to Egypt, and he's saying, I descended with 300 asses. Now, these asses are donkeys. So let's we're not trying to get obscene here. But he comes back from Yam with 300 donkeys laden with incense, ebony, heknu, grain, panther skins, not the actual panthers, ivory, and every good product. So this was a successful trade mission. And it turns out Harkov makes multiple trade missions to these different parts of Kush. So the first thing is to understand it's a love relationship because they're trading. In many periods of time, they are favored trading partners. The Egyptians are getting things they want from Kush. The Kushites are getting things they want from Egyptians. Everyone is happy. Everyone loves each other. Now, this is another example from an Egyptian, another possibly governor, but another official in the 6th dynasty. And his name is Winnie. And in this autobiography of Winnie, he's describing, he says, when His Majesty, and he's referring to the Pharaoh, and this is probably Pharaoh Pepi or Cheops of the 6th dynasty, His Majesty took action against the Asiatic sand dwellers. So I want you to just focus on that. He's waging war. He's not waging war with the Kushites because they're black or for whatever reason. He's waging war with Asiatic people. His Majesty made an army of many tens of thousands from all of Upper Egypt, from Lower Egypt, and all of these different groups from Kush, the Urtjets, the Meja, the Yam, the Wawat, the Cow. These are all different kingdoms in Kush. And I emphasize this because we shouldn't think of the Kushites as a single group of people. There are multiple kingdoms. And later on, when we look at the map, you'll see, why this is important. It's a vast region, multiple ethnicities, but they have engineered a strong alliance, a military alliance. Were these folks mercenary soldiers? I don't know. They may have been, but they may not have been. It may have just been an agreement, an alliance. We will fight for you if you do X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. So the second point, we talked about trade. Now we're talking about military alliances. So maybe we need to take a quick look at Kush first and try to understand. We've already learned that there are different other kingdoms, but there's some very powerful kingdoms that arise in Kush. And I've underlined them, and you can see they're going deeper and deeper into Africa. The first is Kerma. And Brother Trill, maybe you can ask your listeners if they can raise their hands if they've ever heard of Kerma. And while you're doing that,
guys, Kerma. Press 1 in the chat. We got, by the way, so that's 2 things I need you to do for me, chat, please, if you don't mind. And I'm sure you don't. Hit the like. If you've not hit the like, please hit the like button on this live. That would really help us, because YouTube is trying its best right now. I've noticed it. It's trying its best to just dumb everything down. I don't know what the motive is. channels like this are spreading actual useful, you know, world-changing information are not
Mhm.
getting the play, and instead we're getting Jake Paul kind of trash constantly forced down our throats. But
Mhm.
so please hit the like and get the algorithm working. Second thing, so people are reacting. Karma. So people have heard karma before.
Oh, that's
Um,
excellent.
carry on, doctor.
So you have the kingdom of Kerma. Kerma is the oldest, and many folks will say Kerma is actually the oldest city in sub-Saharan Africa. And
Wow.
we're going to talk about that in just a second. Then, much later, you have the kingdom of Napata, and it's the kingdom of Napata that we get the Kushite dynasty that rules Egypt. And just to prepare you for that discussion, you see where Napata is located. So consider that these pharaohs are not just ruling Kush, they're going to eventually rule Kush and Egypt. And then the final kingdom, the kingdom of Meroe. And this is a kingdom during the Greek and Roman times. So I think we should think about what this ancient civilization, we call it Kush, what does it refer to? There are many names. You find the name Taseti, which means land of the bow. If you look at the
Mm.
hieroglyphics, this symbol refers to land. This curved symbol refers to a bow. And as we've already seen, these folks living in south of Egypt have military skills. It turns out they were highly skilled as archers. We have the term Nahesi, which refers to people of Cush, Nubia. And then if we look at the term itself, Cush, this is another Egyptian name that is developed during the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. It's also a name that's used in the Bible. Cush was one of the sons of Ham, from one of Noah's sons. And then Nubia is a Greek term. So what did the Cushites call themselves? We do not know. We do not know what their names were. We may eventually find out, but right now we're not so sure.
Mm.
So these Cushite soldiers, here's uh, depiction of them, formidable looking guys. You see them holding their bows and arrows. They're holding their bows and arrows. And they also have this fierce looking battle axe. So these guys are ready to go to war. And I wouldn't say anything that would agitate them or anger them. This is an architect's reconstruction of what the city of Kerma looked like. Now, the foundations of Kerma date back to the same time as the Egyptian Old Kingdom period. That would be the third dynasty, the fourth dynasty. So Kerma is very old, 4,500 years ago. And it's, if you look at the size, and understand folks may not recognize this, but this is a fairly large city at its time. And Kerma was comparable to many Egyptian large cities. And Kerma is a fortified city. So it's not just a wall that surrounds Kerma. Kerma also has a double, it's actually a double wall that surrounds this heavily fortified city. So you got this wall surrounding the city, and you've already seen who's behind those walls. So my advice would be stay out, stay away. The people of Kerma built monumental architecture, and what you have in Kerma is what's remaining, because there probably many incredible structures that didn't survive. But one that did survive is this structure, which is referred to as the Dufufa. And if you look at the Dufufa, it was actually used as a temple. It was built 4,000 years ago, or around 2000 BC. It's a mud brick structure. It's 82 feet high, and you can see these very courageous men standing on top of it. I'm afraid of heights, so I wouldn't be up there standing on it. 164 feet long, 3 stories tall, over 4,000 years old. So this is the Dufufa. And this is one of the walls surrounding the Western Dufufa. So the people of Kerma were skilled architects. And as we've already seen, they're skilled warriors. You can see them here with their bows and arrows. They also had other weapons like these swords. And they had spears. So these are folks you really didn't want to mess with. And you can probably see why the Egyptians liked having military alliances with the Kushites.
Just to say, Doctor, till today, I mean, I was watching a video recently, and I think it was about archery, and one of the comments was, I think, an Arab guy just saying, if you need a shooter, get one of these Nubian guys, get one of these.
Oh, wow.
It's still something that, you know, that African populations in that I'm talking about black folk now in that eastern area of Africa.
Wow.
It's still something they're known for. By the Arabs who are, you know, mixing and moving around there. It's still something that they carry till today. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Wow, I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that. And so here's some of the other items. Nubia or Kush was rich in gold. And you can imagine this certainly caught the Egyptians' attention because the Egyptians love gold. So gold was one of the items that they traded. We already heard about incense that we saw from Harkov. He had 300 asses, and these asses are carrying a whole bunch of stuff, including incense, frankincense, a really, really incredible product. It is made from a resin that comes from a tree. You know, if you happen, remember from the Bible that what were the gifts that the 3 wise men brought to Christ at his birth? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And of course, around Christmas time at Christmas Mass, I always like going to that Mass because they're burning frankincense. And they also burn frankincense during Easter Mass. And I use a lot of frankincense when I meditate and things of the sort. It's a really, really incredible herb. The way it just, your mind is just relaxed and calm. It really has a calming spiritual effect. So it's easy to understand why it was sacred to the Egyptians and why it was, you know, sacred to the Christians as well. And ivory, another commodity traded. And then the Kushites were skilled in working with ceramics, and they were actually innovators. So they came up with new policies for glazing their bowls and cups and things of that sort that they made. And it turns out the Egyptians loved Kushite pottery. And so this was another commodity. So there was robust trade. And I'll just mention before we leave Kerma that in the kingdom of Kerma, another city, this city named Duki Gel, was built actually less than a mile from Kerma. And ultimately, this becomes a very large city as well, not probably as large as Kerma, but reflecting a different archaeological style. And what most archaeologists will say is that the architecture is more reminiscent from people or influences further south in Africa. So you have more rounded structures. You can see some of them here, but a very different architectural style than what you have in Kerma. So going back to this relationship between the Egyptians and the Kushites, I want to share this finding. So during the first intermediate period, if you remember when I showed you the timeline, this is a period after the Sixth Dynasty. Egypt is kind of in turmoil and people are fighting each other, different factions trying to gain power. And this particular city of Gebelein in Upper Egypt happened to be a haven for Kushite soldiers. And so what you had in this particular center is a mixing of Kushites and Egyptians. And what you see here are stela, or stelae, there are two of them, stelae of Kushites. So these are Kushite soldiers. This one you can even see has his bow, who are married to Egyptian women. This scene shows his family or their family. And here's another Kushite soldier and his Egyptian wife. And this is an interesting piece because you have a mixing here of Kushite and Egyptian soldiers in this particular stela. And there doesn't appear to be any animosity between them, but they seem to be getting along pretty well. So again, you think of these relationships. Obviously, here they're marrying each other, and here they're working together and seem to have a good relationship, which leads me to this concept of Kushite contributions to Egyptian culture. Kush has traditionally been only displayed as the recipient of innovations from Egypt. Nobody has bothered to look at it the other way. And Egypt probably received a lot from Kush and absorbed a lot of their culture. But this is not something that's been focused on. And what we see, here's an example where Egyptian soldiers in the Middle Kingdom, the actual, well, let's move here. The actual hieroglyph for soldier in Egyptian is a Kushite. So here's a Kushite soldier kneeling with a bow. And this is a feather headdress that some Kushite soldier. This is the Egyptian word for soldier. It's a Kushite.
Oh my goodness.
You know, and this is a paper. This paper actually came out a couple years ago. Salim Faraji, or Dr. Salim Faraji, one of our Black scholars, and the work that they're doing is always trying to reevaluate the role of Kush. And so this is a very nice paper, and some other things that I'll be sharing with you come from this paper. But he mentions in this paper that the Egyptian soldiers of the Middle Kingdom, they actually adopted the attire and the regalia and even the hairstyles of the Kushite soldiers. So, you know, this is a very interesting impact that they're having. And then another one of our Black scholars, Egyptologist, Nubiologist, Dr. Solange Ashby, and she has focused on studying how Kushite culture integrates into the sacred rituals that the Egyptians use in worshiping their gods and goddesses. And she has documented how Kushite ritual music and dance was actually incorporated into the Egyptian temple rites for the goddess Hathor. Hathor is one of the very high Egyptian goddesses, but the ritual that is used in her worship is from the Kushites. And so this is a big deal when you start integrating certain customs and things into religious ritual and culture. That is a significant contribution. So these are just a couple of the ways that we see this blending and the borrowing of certain cultural elements. So we talked about the first intermediate period. So there's a lot of turmoil and, you know, different groups are fighting each other. So it's this king from the very south of Egypt. He's Egyptian. And Pharaoh Mentuhotep II of the 11th dynasty. And you can see the period of time that we have, the 11th dynasty. And this is a statue of Mentuhotep II. You can look, you can see what his features are. I actually took this photo myself. This is at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. So if you're in the US, you're in New York, you can go and see this for yourself. This statue of Mentuhotep II is in Cairo, Egypt. So you can clearly see Mentuhotep's features, and Mentuhotep loved Kushite women. He had 6 wives, and we know for sure that 5 of them were Kushite. Some scholars think all of them were Kushite, but 5 of his wives were Kushite. So you can see some of them here. This is his wife. This is Queen Kemsit, who is Kushite. This is Queen Kawit, who's also Kushite.
Holding that bowl like a teacup.
Yeah, yeah, I like the way they. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's
and
a lady
then
with class.
Here's another one, Queen Ashit, another one of his wives, and I like this. This is actually in her tomb. You just see the different complexions of people. Some may be Egyptian, some may be Kushite, and you probably can't make that decision just based on their skin color, who's who. So very interesting. So after the 11th dynasty, we have the 12th dynasty. This is Pharaoh Amenemhat I. So he's the first pharaoh of what is the very powerful 12th dynasty. And you can also see this at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And it turns out that Amenemhat is Egyptian, but his mother was actually Kushite. And Amenemhat may not have been the next legitimate ruler. So one of the things that we find in Egypt and Kush, and even in West African civilizations, Benin, Mali, wherever you have rule, there's this concept of legitimacy of rule. This person is entitled to rule because they're descended from so and so, or whatever the case may be. So what happens is Amenemhat creates this prophecy, which basically is saying a ruler from the south of Egypt the son of a Cushite woman will assume the throne and bring prosperity to all of Egypt. Now, this is supposed to be a prophecy, but it's really weird because it was actually written. I mean, he wrote it. So it's not really a prophecy.
Yeah.
He framed it as if it had been written during an earlier period. So people who think it was written during the earlier period think, okay, it is a prophecy. And so he isn't, they must be talking about Amenemhat because he's from the south and he's the son of a Cushite one, so he's entitled to rule. Well, unfortunately, Amenemhat was assassinated, and his son takes over. But what is starting to happen? You know, all of these incredible weapons and military prowess that we saw from the Cushites, the kingdom of Kerma has its own aspirations, and it is inching further and further and further and further north. And Cush is really becoming a threat. So during the reign of Amenemhat, he builds a fortress to try to keep the Cushites from advancing into Egypt. And it must not have worked very well because his son, Senusret I, built many fortresses along the Nile in Lower Nubia to try to deter campaigns coming up the Nile, or rather coming down the Nile from Kerma. And some folks will say that these campaigns building these fortresses probably wasn't very effective because he kept on building them. So maybe they're not working, you know, but again, in history, you're hearing often one side of the story. You're often hearing from the Egyptians, and they're going to tell the story. And, you know, there's going to be a whole bunch of, propaganda, and they're going to make it seem like it's, I'm trying to think of the word that I want to use to describe it. But anyway, so here are two other rulers of the 12th dynasty, Senusret II. This is Amenemhat III. I actually took this photo again at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. But that was not the only place the only museum. That's not the only museum I go to. I've been to many other museums, like the British Museum. I have some excellent photos of some of the pharaohs from there, but they're not going to be in this presentation. And then Senusret III, kind of the coup de grace here is he builds this huge fortress at Buhin in Lower Nubia. This is built by Nusret III. Now, the question is, did this really work? And I will answer that by saying no, it didn't work, because now we're going into what is referred to as the second intermediate period. And this is a period of increased internal discourse and chaos in Egypt. And what happens is you have these Asiatic peoples referred to as the Hyksos that we think are coming from Palestine, and they take advantage of this disorganization, and they move into Egypt and take control. And I also want to make a point. Again, we talk about other advancements. The Hyksos actually are the ones who invented the chariot. And so they're coming into Egypt in chariots, on horses, taking control. Now, the Egyptians actually take the chariot and improve upon it. The number of innovations that the Egyptians introduced that made the chariot easier to steer and maneuver, because you go into warfare and you got to be able to really maneuver the chariot, but you have to keep it steady because someone might be shooting an arrow, and you can't be bouncing around. So the Egyptians made a lot of improvements. But what we have here is the Hyksos push the Egyptians to this area of Upper Egypt. So this is where the Egyptian pharaohs are ruling from, in Upper Egypt. And then what you have is, from Kerma, the Cushites are seeing this as a golden opportunity. So they are expanding their rule right into Upper Egypt. And it is during this period of time, this second intermediate period, that Kerma is the most powerful kingdom in the Nile Valley for nearly 250 years.
Wow. Wow.
Now, it also should be noted, because I think, Brother Trill, one of the questions that you had is the influence of the Cushites with, outside of Africa, or with other groups of people. It turns out that the Cushites from Kerma and the Hyksos rulers were very closely allied with each other. So they were on very good terms. And you'll see an example of that in just a second. But Kush is really flexing its muscles. And it's actually, during this period of time, we have a recorded attack from Kerma on a city in Upper Egypt. And it's a pretty fierce, violent attack. It's actually documented. The Kushite soldiers come in, they demolish the city, and they carry off, statues and other things. They take them from Egypt and carry them back to Kush. And we know that actually happened because those items that they stole during the raid were actually found in a Kushite burial. So you have a direct archaeological link, in addition to the historical account of this attack. So what happened? Do we need any questions or comments? Cool.
I want to say a massive thank you. We got a really nice guy. What a nice guy. Darius 0974 DAM. I think I recognize you've been around these parts before. Thank you for that amazing contribution. $50 super chat. It says, I appreciate your relentless effort to get the truth out there. I'll take the money, but I think that comment is directed directly at the doctor.
Let's direct the both of us, because we're doing this together.
But thank you very much for that. I think this has been amazing, and
we're not sure.
We're not, and I know that, and I can't wait for what you've got more, because I just wanted to add to that. This is, in terms of it being a relentless effort, and I've been doing this just for a few years. Again, as I discovered tonight, the doctor is no newbie to this. He's been doing this for years. He's had contact with people like Shamaka Keita, Ivan Van Sertima. So we're talking to somebody who knows what he's talking about. Again, a doctor of biology, microbiology, and I believe infectious diseases. So we're somebody who knows how to research and analyze and think critically here. So I wanted to also say, doctor, something you said earlier. You were talking about the soldier, the hieroglyph for the soldier there. And again, guys, just take that in. The hieroglyph, the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph for soldier, incorporates a Nubian archer, okay, a Cushitic, or you might say Nubian archer, whichever. It's the same thing. Well, not strictly speaking, but in the popular mind, it is. Now, you don't have a word for as ingrained. Every culture, every civilization has their word for soldier. Okay, that's a very basic um uh part of your vocabulary as a civilization. You don't have that without without I mean, it's 2026. Just imagine that the Egyptian word for soldier refers to the Kushites, their black neighbors, because like them, they're black also, like the Egyptians who are they're black also, but they're black neighbors that we can all agree are black and are to the south. Now, what are we talking about? What are we talking about if in 2026 we're still getting called names like Afrocentrist and this and that for pointing out that this civilization that we call Egypt was just another ancient black civilization? What are we talking about? Why are we still debating this? A word as basic as soldier. So at which point do we just stop the nonsense? At which point do we stop the, again, pretending like people don't know this? It's amazing to me. I didn't know that, but that's an amazing fact. That's an
It's
amazing fact.
it's it at this point, many people have do not associate Egypt with Africa at all. And when you look at how, and I can tell you right here, I can again, since I'm a nerd, I'm always watching documentaries, and literally almost every night I can find a documentary on Egypt somewhere. It's one of the most extensively studied cultures and civilizations on the planet. And so, and it's one of the oldest and it's one of the most advanced. And so, the fact that it could be, have been built by blacks is just not something that's going to resonate. But we have to, again, do what we do, teach each other, but we also have to have champions like Dr. Faraji and Dr. Ashby, writing, and they know the language. So they are archaeologists, they are historians, so they know, and they're doing this research, and this has changed. As a matter of fact, Dr. Solange Ashby, I think, just released a volume. I'm going to have to see if I can order that. So that's Solange, Solange Ashby. So if you want to Google that, ASHY, I'm sorry, ASHBY, Ashby. She just did that. But to finish up, because we're running, I'm watching the clock, and I don't want to put everybody to sleep. But so how do the Egyptians come back from this? So this region that I showed you where Egypt was limited, eventually the Egyptians, and they are fighting back. They're trying to push the Hyksos out of Egypt. And eventually they do. They succeed. They push the Hyksos out. It is Kamos, who is the soldier after his father is killed from the 17th dynasty in Egypt, trying to fight the Hyksos. He's killed in battle. So Kamos puts together an army. He pushes the Hyksos out, and he attacks, and he launches a vicious assault on the Hyksos. And you find here the Stela of Kamos. He's writing about his attack on the Hyksos. And one of the things that happens is he describes here how they capture a messenger. This is a messenger being sent from the Hyksos king to Kerma, asking for help, asking the ruler of Kerma to come to his aid, to send his soldiers. So this is giving you an example of what the Hyksos think about the Kushites. They're a very, very powerful army. So eventually, Kamos reclaims Lower Egypt. He expels the Hyksos. he establishes the 18th, the very powerful 18th dynasty of Egypt. And then they turn their attention south. And it's like, okay, these Kushites have gone too far. They're out of control. We need to put them in check. So it's the 18th dynasty Pharaoh, Thutmose I, goes and just basically destroys Kerma. The Egyptians set up an administrative center in the city of Duki Gel, which is just adjacent, just right next to Kerma, as I described. And essentially, the Egyptians rule and colonize Kush for the next 400 years. So the Egyptians take over and they colonize Kush. And the last thing I will say about that period before I quickly touch on some of the other Kushite kingdoms, one of our archaeologists, Dr. Stuart Tyson Smith, has done a lot of excavations in Kush and looking at these Egyptian Nubian interaction. Now, again, Kush, they're now a colony of Egypt. But what Dr. Tyson stresses, and this is a point I raised in the paper, pushing back on the documentaries on the Black Pharaohs, is that colonization to the Egyptians is not the same colonization that the Europeans imposed upon Africans and Southeast Asians and Latin America. It's not that type of colonization where you take control and you force your culture on the people and you take control of their resources. Dr. Smith basically says there's kind of a trade-off, and that the Kushites were allowed to practice their religion. The Kushites were allowed to do many things that you would not see colonized people being allowed to do under, like, from the last 200, 300, 400 years under the European colonialism that we're familiar with. So they rule and they become again under the control of the Egyptians. And you can see here a group of Kushite princes. They are going to pay tribute. This is believed to have been done during the reign of Tutankhamun in the 18th dynasty. And guess where you can see this? The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And while you're there, you might as well take advantage of it. Wonderful things to see. But these Kushite soldiers paying tribute to the Egyptians. Now, just two slides before I talk some about Napata and Merowe. So this is an image that got a lot of attention in the documentary on the Black Pharaoh.
Yes. Yes, and thank you.
That they're again, oh, look how these Egyptians hate the Kushites. Now, if we go back to the period where we saw, like in the 12th dynasty, yeah, the Egyptians hated the Kushites because they were a pain in the butt. Or since we've already used the term ass, they were a pain in the ass. But this time, not the ass is not a donkey. It's a pain in the butt. The Kushites were a threat. They were a continuous threat. They were an enemy to the Egyptians. So the Egyptians didn't hate them because they were Black. They hated them because they were a pain in the butt. They were a military adversary. They had the power to inflict pain on Egypt. So they showed these scenes like, oh, look how these Egyptians hated they're trampling them down with horses, and they hate them so badly, and they're capturing them, and they're black and they hate them, and blah 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 blah. And then you have this scene where Ramses is slaughtering the Hittites. Now, these are not black people, these are white people, these are Asiatic people. So enemies are enemies. And for them to selectively say, well, they, imprison the Cushites, because they're black. No, this is war. So the Egyptians portray their enemies the same way. And this is something I point out in my paper. I show examples of the Egyptians slaughtering white Asiatic peoples the same way you see them slaughtering black Africans.
Just on that point, if you go back to that Ramses painting, the first one, it's a very good point. It's been made before, but the complexion of the Egyptian pharaoh is the same as some of the Cushites. You can see that. So that's something that, again, because we're programmed, that I had to have that pointed out to me. I don't know why. Now that I think about it, again, I was very, very green in the game. And it was at the very beginning, and I think it was one of the things that inspired me to start my channel. It was one of the last straws that made me think, you know what, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring as well. Just got to tell people about this. This is unbelievable. But I think it was a guy called Kweli Mika. Shout out to him. Kweli Mika did a video on this, and he pointed that out, that the complexion is just different variations of what we would today in Europe call black. It's just, and so you've got some Cushites who are brown and some who are pitch black, and you still get that in East Africa, Northeast Africa today. So anyway, carry on, Doctor.
Yeah, it's variation, and there's actually more variation in Africa than there is in Europe, but strangely, they'll recognize variability when it occurs in Europe, yet they don't when they talk about Africa. That's another discussion. Let me just talk about very quickly the Kushite pharaohs in the 25th dynasty, and they really are amazing. They really are a big deal, and these Kushite pharaohs established control. Again, this is the third intermediate period, and they established control over Egypt during a time of disarray. And they start building campaigns, and they start expanding. And so this is a really, really prosperous dynasty. These Kushite kings do some incredible things while they're ruling Egypt. And keep in mind, they're ruling Egypt and Kush at the same time. And this is the victory stela of Paye or Pianki. You'll find multiple names for many of these rulers. Some of them are Greek names and some are Egyptian, different variations. So Paye is the pharaoh who is most attributed to taking control of Egypt, moving in from Upper Egypt, conquering Lower Egypt, and establishing the control while maintaining his connections at the capital of Napata, which was Nuri, where you'll see later they were building pyramids. And at the time that Pianki or Paye conquers this delta region, Lower Egypt, this is one of the rulers, a Libyan pharaoh or Libyan ruler in Egypt. Yuput, the second, is ruling in the Nile Valley. And Pianki basically allows or keeps Yuput on board, and he serves as a governor of that district in Lower Egypt. Two other of the Kushite pharaohs, so Shabaka, succeeding Pianki. There's actually another pharaoh right ahead of Shabaka. And then Taharka, probably one of the most famous of these Kushite pharaohs. And one of the reasons is because Taharka fights quite fiercely in attacking the Assyrians and fighting off the Assyrians. And so in the Bible, they're quite happy because Taharka is coming forth to make war against the Assyrians. They're fighting the Assyrians, and of course, the Assyrians were enemies of the Jews. So, you know, we heard say Taharka, Kima of Ethiopia, behold, he has come out to fight against thee. So this is a warning to the Assyrians. Taharka is coming to fight you. So this dynasty not only takes over, takes control of Egypt, but they start pushing into the Middle East. And this causes tensions between the Assyrians. So those folks who want to research this can read of some of these tensions. And then the final ruler of this dynasty, and some people will say, pronounce his name Tantamani or Kanutamani. It's tricky because, again, the Egyptians don't use any vowels. So it's tricky to know how names were actually pronounced. And this is a section in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah, where he is talking about the Cushites and the Egyptians and these tensions with the Assyrians. So they're describing these battles that are taking place with Cush and Egypt. My version of the Bible has Ethiopia, the word Ethiopia instead of Cush. Ethiopia is a very general term. You understand, they're not talking about the modern day country of Ethiopia, but Ethiopia is often used for Africa. It means a burnt face. So African Black people had what they thought were burnt faces because, you know, we live where it's hot, where the sun. It's not a derogatory term. It's just that they thought that people were Black because they lived closer to the sun, because it's hot in Africa. They're closer to the sun, so they have a dark complexion. It's not anything negative or bad. It's just the way nature is. So your version may say Ethiopia. Some versions say Cush. I don't know what the original text. And of course, the Napatan pharaohs or the Kushite pharaohs built pyramids. Some of these pharaohs are buried at these pyramids in Nuri. Some of them are buried at pyramids in El Kuru. So these are places in Kush where they are buried. I think I have just almost run out of time, but let me quickly talk about the kingdom of Meroe, which has many incredible attributes. But there are actually more pyramids in Meroe, and there are actually more pyramids in the Sudan than all of Egypt. So when you look at these pyramids in Kush, these Napatan pyramids, and then the pyramids at Meroe, they're a different style, different structure, but they're all tombs for the rulers, for the kings. So Meroe, from 300 BC to 380, roughly 600 years, very powerful. So they're ruling Nubia during the time that the Greeks are ruling Egypt. And one of the things that Brother Chur wanted me to talk some about is this Meroitic script. So if you look at the Cushites in Napata, they wrote, but they wrote in Egyptian. So they could write, and we have writings from them. So you'll hear about the Stela of Taharka or the Stela of Shabaka. So when they would conquer, when they would build things, they would write, but they were writing in Egyptian. Well, of
No,
course,
I don't mean to be petty, doctor, but this is 700 BC, so we're talking 2,700 years ago at the earliest. Folks, there ain't
well,
no
not
writing going on.
wait a minute, not 700 years ago,
Sorry, no,
2,700 years ago.
thank you. 2,700 years ago. we Not to be petty, but I will be petty. We don't have any writing going on in Viking land 2,700 years ago. We don't have any writing going on in no Scandinavia 27. So
That is true. That is true.
Just gonna put that out there.
And I think the Vikings actually may have had a script, but again, it wasn't 2,700 years ago.
No,
right.
Just say.
And so a number of advancements were made in this Meroitic script. And so, like the Egyptians, they had a hieroglyphic system, and you can see some of the symbols, the hieroglyphs, and they had a cursive or demotic writing. Like the Egyptians had hieroglyphs in a demotic writing system. But the Meroitic script adds vowels. The Egyptian language does not have vowels. The Meroitic writing system has vowels, and there are other real advancements of this writing system. And so you can see examples. This is one of my favorite rulers in Meroe, Queen Amani Sheketo. And you can see a stela from Amani Sheketo. So this is in the Meroitic writing system. One of the things about these queens, they're very powerful queens. This is not like Egypt, and the lineage of rulers is done matrilineally. So it's based on the relations of the mother. It's not through the father, through the paternal lineage. It's through the maternal lineage, their ruler. And here's just some very elegant jewelry from Meroe. I'll mention very quickly this queen, Amanirenas of Meroe. This is the queen that confronted the Romans. So everybody, as we talked about earlier, everyone knows Rome conquered Egypt. So you got Cleopatra and Augustus, Caesar, and I'm trying to think, Mark Antony and Cleopatra. So everyone knows about this. And Cleopatra was actually pretty brilliant because she fought hard to save Egypt from the rule of the Romans. And she was strategic, and she did what she had to do, which included having kids by some of the Roman emperors. But again, that was really strategic, because if you have a son who's in Egypt, are you going to go in and conquer or destroy, particularly when he's of royal lineage? So that was a strategic move. Cleopatra did what she had to do. Well, the Meroe was never conquered by Rome. And part of it is because of these queens with this title, Kandake. Kandake is what we refer to as these queens. Amanirenas leads a group of soldiers and confronts the Romans. And essentially, they call a truce, and they negotiate a peace treaty. And as a result of this peace treaty with Rome, Meroe is never conquered or controlled by Rome. And Rome is the most powerful empire in the world, maybe one of the most powerful empires ever. And it controlled all of North Africa, Egypt, Numidia, Mauritania. All of those regions of North Africa were controlled by the Romans, but Meroe was not controlled by Rome.
It's my understanding they had to sue for peace, the Romans.
They had the what?
Sue for peace with the Cushites, the Meroites.
Yeah. So, a lot of it is about trade and competition. It's complicated again, but the position that Meroe had in Africa, they had access to things that the Romans didn't have access to, that they might have wanted access to. So that's I don't know a lot about that, but that's something that I can study a bit more. Queen Amani Shiketo succeeded her. And one of the amazing things about these Kushite queens is they are militant. They're not playing around. And you see, here's Amani Shiketo. She's got prisoners. And you see these Kushite queens with swords, wielding swords, and not hesitating to go into battle, just like Marines. I mean, they would fight. They didn't play around. And so this last slide, again, a reference to Meroe from the Bible, a eunuch. And for those who don't know, a eunuch is a male servant who is castrated, and he's castrated to make sure there's no hanky-panky going on with the queen. But this eunuch and again, they're using the term Ethiopia, but he's from Kush, because he's a court official, and the title they use is Candace, which is a Latin form of Kandake, as we just mentioned. So she's the queen of Kush, and he's in charge of all her treasure. And basically, one of the disciples, Philip, encounters this Kushite man and actually baptizes him. So they're saying the Holy Spirit, this is in the book of Acts, the Holy Spirit is telling Philip, go join this man in his chariot. And he starts talking about the Gospels and stuff. And Philip actually baptizes this man, and he brings Christianity to Meroe. So late, the kingdom of Nubia, again, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. And hopefully your viewers know that Ethiopia is the oldest Christian country in the world. It's a whole version of Christianity that is an African. The church in Egypt, the Coptic Egyptian church in Africa. So I have said a lot, and if there's anybody still on, thank you for listening
Doctor,
to me.
They've gathered en masse as you were talking. Actually, people got our numbers grew and grew and grew as you were talking.
Wow.
So you didn't bore anybody at all. You didn't put anybody to sleep. Good. Certainly not myself. You spoke about the Romans just now. What do we know about how the interaction between the Romans and, apart from the war, what do we know about how what did the Romans, these Hellenized people, because really the Romans were just Greeks, except just one step removed or half a step removed. What do we know about how they interacted with Kush, and what was their impression? Because I asked that because today it's like, people. There's a phrase a word I like that I've picked up recently. I don't know from where exactly, but it actually portrays a phenomenon, and it's called presentism. People like to project onto the past their perspectives, or that what today's like. They'll project the racism, like you were talking about with the documentary. They project their racism and their racist assumptions onto the past. But what were the Romans view and the Greeks, people like the Greeks? What was their, not that their impression matters anyway, but what did they think of people like Kush and the Nubians?
So, what I would say. So again, we can base this on what the actual interactions were. Of course, they had, and we have writings from Roman writers talking about this war and the peace treaty and on and on and on. Um, uh, Famously, one of these queens launched a raid into Egypt, which again was under control of Rome, and basically smashes this statue of Caesar, Caesar Augustus, and carries the head of the statue back to Kush, and they find this Roman head of the emperor. So it's kind of like a sign, look, you don't scare us, we're not afraid of you. But I think once they had the peace treaty, and I can't say with certainty, but I think they respected the peace treaty. The Africans, I'm sorry, the Romans and the Greeks especially, and this is really important, we don't hear derogatory language about someone because they're Black. We don't hear that from the Greeks, and we don't hear that from the Romans. As a matter of fact, the Greeks are the ones that told us, they're like, look, we got our calendar from the Egyptians. We got our gods. The fact that we worship 12, we learned the rituals and religion and the worship of gods. We learned that from these Black people. And if you look at in ancient Greece, for example, who was the first Greek writer? That would have been Homer. And Homer writing in, I can't remember whether it's the Iliad or the Odyssey, but their high god, Poseidon, starts off at the very first few sentences or paragraphs of the Iliad or the Odyssey. I can't remember which one it is. This god is with the Ethiopians. It's like, oh, Poseidon, he's not around. Like, well, we're getting ready to go to war. It's like, well, Poseidon ain't around to help you, because where is he? He's with the Africans. He's with the Ethiopians. Well, why is he with the Ethiopians? Because they are the oldest and the most sacred of people. So their high god is with these Black people. And then if you look at the Trojan War, the last great battle of the Trojan War is from the king Memnon. And we don't know who Memnon is, and we don't know if he ever existed. But basically, the Greeks are moving in on the Trojans, and they're like, the Trojans are like, well, we're about to call it quits because they're going to wipe us out. And then the king of the Trojans, he looks over the horizon, and it's really amazing. He says he sees these ships, and he sees the black skin of these oarsmen who are rowing these ships, and their black skin is glistening in the sun from the sweat of their skin. And this is Memnon, who is bringing his armies to fight off the Greeks, to fight for the Trojans. This is the last great battle in the Trojan War before the Greeks eventually, send in the Trojan horse and destroy it. So this Black king Memnon is mentioned in the Iliad as the last great battle. And so the legendary founder of Rome, Aeneas, goes to Carthage. and he sees a mural of the Trojan War, and he sees Memnon, you know, in the Aeneid. He sees the battle. He sees the face of Black Memnon. That is what I had 4 years of Latin when I was in high school. We read the Aeneid. So this interaction in the ancient world between the Romans and between the Greeks, they did not see Black people as inferior. Essentially, the Romans saw everybody as inferior. If you're not Roman, you're inferior. But if you read the writings, the people who they saw inferior, those were the people in Gaul, which was modern day France. Those were Germanic people. They called those people barbarians and heathens. Those are the people they thought were uncivilized. It wasn't people in Africa. It's the people in Europe that they're looking down on. They look down on Gaul, the heathens. You read Caesar's commentary of the Gallic Wars, where they're fighting. They're fighting. They consider those people inferior, not Africans. I don't know if that answers the question, but
it answers it brilliantly. And we only have to say that because you're out there saying that we're the inferior ones. That's why we have to put you know that stuff straight. You know, but when you're coming for us and you're making these documentaries that are sending oblique shots and pretending to be, you know, platforming Black civilizations, where in actual fact what you're saying, you're denigrating it. We have to put we gotta put things straight. So if you want to talk about, like as the doctor's saying, who's considered inferior in ancient times, it ain't us. It's actually, ironically speaking, it's you. You know, it's people who are writing these tomes now, thousands of years later, that were considered in antiquity. I saw a comment recently. I can't remember on whose channel now. I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, but it was just saying actually, a lot of Western Europe is its history. I think it's Pimento Bay, Dr. Pimento Bay, Jose Pimento Bay, great guy. He was saying if you look at Western Europe, it's a baby. It's a baby in terms of history, great history. No one, why deny that? We're not the petty ones here, you know, but it's still relatively compared to Africa. It's not its baby. It's an infant, and so I want to talk about this document. It was so again, guys, this is all based on a documentary, a pair of documentaries that were put out a few years back: Rise of the Black Pharaohs and something else named similarly generic.
Similar. I can't remember the name.
I was disappointed in that second one. Actually, I think it was a Black individual who fronted it as well. So I was quite disappointed in that as well, that they framed the narrative in that way. But you know, each to their own. Maybe, you know, everyone's got their time of waking up. But what's that? That's mine. Nope, thank you. So I got one of these burner phones. If anyone's wondering why I've got why an old Nokia tune came on. But what I was gonna say was, these documentaries, Doctor, what do you they do a very good job of framing the narrative in a very, very sort of negative way towards Black sort of Africans. How do we I'm really bothered about how we get into like the popular space, popular media, and correct these things. When you said you got in touch with the producers of that thing, what did you get back? What kind of response did you get back from them?
Well, you know, they tried to push back and say, well, you know, we're basing, you know, it might have not have been perfect, but I'm like, no, come on. This is intentional. This is intentional. And they would try to make some argument, well, you know, it's this, that, and we're like, no, that is not correct. Okay. You have experts on your team. You got, people like I say, Jeff Emberling is a phenomenal archaeologist, and all these other folks, they know the truth. So why and they're familiar with a lot of Dr. Shamarka Keita and some of the other people who have done studies on the craniometrics and the genetics and the different studies looking at the racial composition, the racial identity of these populations. So they're familiar with it. But again, they would rather uphold false theories or change the narrative, or as you mentioned, using presentism, where they're like, okay, we're going to impose the way we think on people who lived 4,000 years ago, which is ridiculous. I think most people would take it doesn't make sense. So they're imposing, in this case, racist thinking on Egyptians who didn't think that way, and didn't think that way for a lot of reasons. When you're saying, well, they hate the Cushites because they're black. Well, many of them were black themselves. So if they hated the Cushite, they hate because they're black. But again, the Egyptians, I think I tried to show balance here, where they're attacking Nubians and Cushites. Well, they're attacking Asiatics too. So it's not about race. It's about, do we want to extend our boundary? Are these our friends or our foes? Or, what is the relationship? The relationship is not based on race for these ancient peoples. But that's how these folks in their narrow minds want to portray it, even though they know it's not accurate.
Why do you think? Let's just get down to I want to get out to a really juicy question. In your opinion, what's the motive behind this? I know we can say we've already touched on the R word, but let's try and be a bit more analytical. What is the motivation? I said earlier, some folks just don't like black people, but it must be more complicated than that. Have you in your interactions, I mean, even at your workplace, I don't know if this ever comes up in casual discussion. Oh, what are you doing for the weekend, Keith? Oh, I'm writing an article on the Black Pharaohs. What's your impression as to why people can't get this in their head?
Well, let me do this. It's our time shifted here, so we had daylight for most, but now so let me turn the light on.
Okay, no problem.
Give me 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
Okay. I'll add him back to stage in a minute. Okay. There he comes.
Okay, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, that's much better.
So what we have here, and this is what we're seeing actually happening, is this myth of Western civilization. And this is one of the foundational concepts of white supremacy. And we actually just heard this echoed in a speech recently. I think it was in Germany, maybe Munich, Germany, by our Secretary of State, where he's talking about Western civilization. So he's going to these Europeans and he's like, yeah, this Western civilization that we have, mind you, this is coming from a person who is a Cuban, who has undoubtedly ancestry from indigenous peoples. Okay, but people play the role that that they want to. So he's decided he's going to dismiss that. But this Western civilization, which basically means that you had the ingenuity of the Greek civilization, followed by the Roman civilization, and we mastered, civilization, and then in the Middle Ages, whatever, we had the Renaissance, where suddenly we're like super smart and we got all these ideas, and then we sail around the world and we disseminate our wisdom. By the way, we rape, plunder, and pillage people of color, and we enslave people, and we use them to generate economic wealth. So this myth of this Western civilization has a number of flaws. First of all, if you start talking about the ingenuity of Greeks and Romans and stuff, I will give the Greeks, I will give the Romans their due, because they were brilliant people. They were masters of architecture and engineering and social systems. And I mean, Rome, like we said earlier, had one of the greatest empires, one of the strongest empires in the world. But when you start talking about the Greeks, and I mentioned this earlier too, who are these Greek philosophers? Because Western civilization is like, oh, we had all these smart Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and blah, 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 blah. We had these super smart guys like Pythagoras, who came up with the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras studied 20 years in Africa, in Egypt. Euclid studied 20 years in Egypt and Africa. And you can look at the Greek philosophers, and I can't pronounce all of their names right now, but there's a whole bunch of them that studied in Africa. They studied in Egypt. They were admitted into these mystery systems. And some of these Greeks went back to Greece and were persecuted because what they were teaching was a foreign philosophy. It was not the way Europeans thought. It was not a philosophical system that they were used to or that they were accustomed to. So it's an African philosophy. And so, and then consider that you have people like Herodotus, who is the father of history, writing in ancient Greece and writing about contributions to Greek society. I mentioned this earlier, the calendar and, their system of worship and stuff. So he's giving credit to these Africans. Now, this is not to say that the Greek civilization didn't have the elements to be a very powerful civilization, but they got some of that, or at least part of that, from Africans. That's the first point. The second point, this Renaissance where people pop up and all of a suddenly are super smart. There wouldn't have been a Renaissance had the Moors not been in Europe for 700 years. The Moors in Portugal and Spain, on the Iberian Peninsula, the Moors had libraries. The Moors were a repository of knowledge and wisdom all across the world. They were taking knowledge from China and from India and from Arabia and from Persia, and they were bringing all of that wisdom and knowledge into Europe. And they were studying in libraries, and they had schools. And by the way, those libraries in Spain, in Islamic Spain, Moorish Spain, were connected to the intellectual tradition in ancient kingdoms of Mali, for example. So again, that's a Muslim state. So they're all connected. And so it was the translation of Greek text by the Moors And you start thinking about things like astronomy. This is work by the Moors, who actually worked with lenses and optics and had developed telescopes and all sorts of things. So they were observing this, because if you remember, and by the way, you look at people like Galileo and his revolutionary theory. Galileo barely escaped being burnt on the stake. Okay, because what he was preaching about the movement of the stars in the universe and the earth rotating around the sun, that was considered heresy. And he was about almost got burnt on the stake. But the Moors were the ones who were capturing all of this. So all of these great ideas that suddenly popped into the heads of Europeans popped in after they were inserted by the Moors, because the Moors translated many of these texts into Latin so that Europeans could read them. And that's where they're suddenly getting all these ideas. So when you start talking about this Western civilization being so great, you really, really need to consider that. And also the fact that when these Europeans start moving into these different civilizations, when they're coming into Latin America, when the Spanish are encountering the Mayan Empire, the Aztec, the Incas, these are highly advanced cultures. They had mathematics, they had science, they had agriculture, they had architecture. They were in many ways more advanced than the Europeans. So how are you going to go into these communities and say they were inferior when the Europeans went to Benin in West Africa and went to the kingdom of Benin? They were mesmerized because the people of Benin had architecture and engineering and all of these skills. It was a phenomenal society. They had never seen anything like that before. So to come and then say we went into these communities, people are swinging from trees and have tails and all, they're uncivilized and all of this nonsense. That's not what they saw when they went to these communities, wherever they went, wherever they were on the planet. So I think it's this. It's not simply a matter of not liking Black people. It's this Western civilization as this is gold. This is the salvation. We're the salvation of the world. We're the ones who created all of this. We're the ones who are going to rescue everyone. I think we know that that's not the case, because even if it were true that they had developed all these sciences and all this innovation on their own, they're not able to put it into an ethical or moral framework where they don't have the need to try to subjugate people or to try to steal their resources and control their resources. A lot of this is behind controlling resources. Look at what's happening. Look at what happened in
they're just straight out they're just straight out just robbing now. They're just going in to literally kidnapping presidents and and just openly saying, yeah, we're shipping gold and oil.
Take the oil. And we need like we need more fossil fuels to destroy the planet. So this is where we are.
Professor, one more, Doctor, one more question before I let you go. You've been absolutely fantastic. We're gonna have to have you back at some point because this has been you've not even really touched the sides here, but everyone that's been listening, nothing but gold. Everyone's been saying amazing things about this presentation. I want to ask you one thing before I let you go. The Meroitic script, it really bothers me that it's not been deciphered, and I cannot let that fact go. Do you know of any developments in that way, and do you have any theories as to why it hasn't been done yet, when we have the Egyptian hieroglyphics were deciphered over 100 years ago, I think about 200 years ago plus now, but we have nothing on the Meroitic script. It's my opinion that they could have been deciphered by now, but there's a lot of information that we would know that wouldn't be palatable to the established order if that script is deciphered. So it's very convenient to just, kind of let it just hang. But that's my theory. What's your theory, and do you know anything about the developments that way?
So I do know a little, not much. It's very difficult. The process of deciphering a script from ancient civilizations is very difficult, and the reason why we decipher, why we can read hieroglyphics and Demotic in Egypt, is because of the Rosetta Stone. And the Rosetta Stone had hieroglyphic Egyptian writing, it had Demotic Egyptian writing, and then it had Greek. So it's like, okay, and thankfully they were all saying the same thing. So people translated the Greek, and they're like, okay, so this is what, and so they could look for words that recurred in the Greek and see, okay, what symbols are reoccurring in the hieroglyphic or in the Demotic. And basically, the fact that that Greek translation allowed them, or not the translation, but the Greek writing allowed them to translate the Demotic and the hieroglyphics. We don't have yet a version of Meroitic Rosetta Stone, but
Right.
that's not to say that it's not out there. One of the problems is you have probably 10 times more excavations being done in Egypt than are being done in Kush. And again, because it's a value. But I mean, there's some remarkable things being found in Egypt. It's almost anywhere you stick a shovel, you're going to find something of interest. And so, but, there's still this bias. And the only way you're going to resolve that is by doing the excavations and doing the work. So I think that will be the secret to deciphering that text is finding a Rosetta Stone, a Meroitic Rosetta Stone.
I just know they're sitting on something that they the powers that be are sitting on something. Hate to get conspiratorial, but they're sitting on something that would solve that in a second. But it's just not convenient. They're working out how exactly to spin whatever they come out with when they come out with it, because you should have by now found something that juxtaposes the Meroitic script with Egyptian
with something
hieroglyphs,
maybe another African language like Amharic, Ge'ez from Ethiopia. That would be the precursor language for Amharic. So maybe something like that, because we know that they interacted. So
yeah, definitely. I want to say a massive thank you to Dr. Keith Crawford. If you don't, he hasn't got a YouTube channel. He hasn't got a YouTube channel. Thank you, sir. But he does do work highlighting our history and these important bits of information. And what's the organization that you're linked with? The educational organization that you're linked with?
It's called the African Link Initiative. And these are some brilliant young women and men. We had them actually here in DC over the weekend, and we went to the National Museum of African American History. And that was an amazing event. And in a couple of weeks, we are going to have what we call our DNA reveal party, where these young people have sent in the samples to get their DNA tested to see what parts of Africa their ancestors came from. So that's going to be very exciting. But we teach them about our ancient African civilizations, and we draw connections between Africa and African American history and culture, and we encourage their academic pursuits. And so African Link Initiative, if you Google them, make a donation. You know, I'm not asking for anything. I ain't getting anything. So make a donation for me through them.
Definitely. Definitely. Thank you. African Link Initiative, guys. African Link Initiative. I've been on the website. It's beautiful. It's well done, and it's an initiative that you want to get behind. Let's put our money where our mouths are. I'm gonna hit this button. I'm trialing some things right now. Let me just give you a massive round of applause. Let's keep going on chat. Press 1 in the chat if you've had an amazing time tonight, because I have. I need us to appreciate the doctor before we leave. I want to see lots and lots of ones in the chat. Doctor, it's been amazing. I need you back because there are questions I didn't get to ask because of the the information that you brought to the table. But so sometime in the future, I will have to ply you back with something. But thank you so much for joining us, chat. You've been
Thank you so much for your excellent work and all the things that you're doing to educate us. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Doctor. All right, chat, you've been amazing. From Kush to Compton, it's been Trill Black with Dr. Crawford. See you guys in the next one, okay? Take care and have a blessed.
Take care, everybody. Thank you all for joining. Thank you.
Peace.